So my friend's been pestering me to do a vlog, you know who you are. So the topic that was suggested to talk about was whether or not the mind and the brain are the same thing or whether they are separate things, and whether or not you're actually in control of what's going on. So I've read a lot of books on this topic, and I've read a lot of kind of things on consciousness and stuff like that. So this will be like a little kind of very quick summary of what I reckon it is. So for a long time people believed that we had like what's called a Cartesian, something like that. I've only read it, I think I haven't really heard it, so I can't really pronounce it. But it basically means that you've got a homunculus in your brain, a little man inside your brain that's like, at the control panel controlling what's going on. So this whole idea of that has come from like the Greeks and Roman time. They're kind of the same, aren't they? Greeks and Romans. They have different words, but they say the same stuff. So that was kind of the belief, so that you who you believe you are like inside in your mind, like controlling things. But the logical flaw in that argument is that, well, who's inside their head and then who's inside their head, and it's all turtles all the way down, isn't it? It's kind of that kind of circular kind of illogical argument. So that can't be the case. You can't be a little, kind of, I was going to say sedentary, but that's like sedentary. I'm having problems with pronouncing words today. So you're not like a little person inside your head, like that's not what's happening. And then there's been kind of people that have come along recently, more kind of like, all the philosophers were like, you are inside the body, and that this whole idea of a soul, so the soul is kind of separate. It's all come from philosophy, and the problem with philosophy is philosophy doesn't have any kind of evidence. It's not an evidence-driven kind of subject, so it's often very flawed in its assumptions. It's kind of someone who thinks a lot about something and thinks, yeah, that's a good idea, but good ideas were that the world was flat originally. So you kind of need some kind of experiments. And since the kind of wave of psychology where it's come into place of like more kind of neurological kind of studies, more kind of, we have technology now like brain scanners and things to have a look at how the brain functions and stuff, so we can be a lot more kind of informed in our decisions about how the brain's working. And we've done so many studies which kind of show that the different hemispheres of the brain work in different ways. There's what's called lateralization of functioning. Michael Gazzaniga and Sperry, key researchers in this area, where they found that a person that has a split brain, so they've cut the corpus callosum to kind of contain epilepsy within one hemisphere, so that you can have what's called an absence seizure rather than a full-blown one, so you improve your quality of life. They found that when they showed kind of information to the left visual field, it was processed by the right hemisphere, and the person couldn't say what they'd seen because language was located in the left hemisphere, and there's crossing over of information. Only if you're right-handed, it's different if you're left-handed, because your brain area, your language areas are in different places. But what it was kind of indicating was that there was other things that they did as well, like they showed like naked pictures to the left visual field, and the person said that they couldn't see anything but they would blush. And so it was indicating that there's information going into your mind that the conscious you is not aware of. And I've mentioned this on another kind of vlog before. Like, there's so much information that goes in that you don't know about, that's not you. Now, this idea that you as an existing thing is separate from the rest of your brain is a bit ridiculous, because if you are not your brain, then who are you and where are you? Like, my belief is that there is, the mind is the brain. It's the same thing. Like, the brain, the physical structure, and the mind, it's like the brain is the hardware, the mind is the software, if you will, in terms of computing sense. But again, we talk about our brain as being a nodulus with a computer, but that's only to help us conceptualize it. Like, we've built computers based on what we know about the brain. Like, because of psychology, we have computers. So it's kind of like, is that really even a way of explaining how your mind is actually working? You know, a lot of people are kind of like of the belief of there's, in our culture, there's head and there's heart. There's heart, our feelings, our emotions, and what we think about things, and then there's our head, which is like the logical, thinking about all the information. Now, personally, I'm a very logical person. Like, I make decisions like that. I'm very good at kind of knowing what I want. I'm very good at knowing what I don't want. I'm very good at kind of weighing up the pros and cons of something. And if I feel a certain way, I ignore my feelings and I go with the logical way of doing it. You know, people, like, when they make decisions about relationships, they very much use their heart. They very much go with how they feel about things. But I kind of view it as that's a really naive way of choosing a relationship and choosing a partner. Like, you know, you can be attracted to the most, like, you know for a fact when you break up with someone, you look at them and you go, what was I thinking? They are horrific for me. Now, if you'd have made that choice logically before you went into that relationship, that wouldn't have happened. You wouldn't have dated somebody who was horrific for you and spent, you know, wasted a year of your life and then realised, oh my God, I've just wasted a year of my life with someone who's an arsehole. Like, you would have known that before if you'd have been logical about it. Like, you can get feelings for someone because they give you a bit of attention. You can get feelings for someone because they like you and it's nice to be liked by someone. You know, you can have emotions attached to somebody. You can have emotions attached to someone because they remind you of somebody else that you used to like. But that doesn't make that the logical choice, the best choice for you. So it's almost like, I find it really weird when people go with their emotions and they don't think about things logically as well. And they go, you know, oh, to go with the heart is better than going with the head because the head is unfeeling and cold. It's like, well, no, the head actually, you know, knows a lot more than the emotions know, because the emotions are based on when you were younger and you were a kid and you didn't really understand how the world worked and what was in it. The emotions would... you'd feel emotions, but you wouldn't be able to understand why you're feeling them. So, you know, if somebody did something to you, which is not a real big deal when you're an adult, but it is when you're a child, you respond in a certain way and you encode all that information into your brain like a blueprint, so that when you get an adult, if the same thing happens, it triggers again. But as an adult, you've got to understand that you might be having that feeling because of everything that went on in the past, but logically now it doesn't make sense to behave in that way. So, like, an example would be, I don't know, say like you were playing with somebody when you were younger, playing with a toy or whatever, like with 3 children, 2 other children and you, and they left you out and you felt upset. Then when you get to be an adult and the similar thing happens, so somebody leaves you out, you automatically feel like that, you feel really bad and it's a big deal. But logically you know that you weren't really left out, they just wanted to spend some time together because they're friends and they've not seen each other and they want to talk to each other without it being a group situation. They wanted that one-on-one conversation. So it's like, as an adult, you can kind of realise that it's not a big deal, but you've still got those emotional reactions. And so to kind of make decisions based on your heart rather than your head, it just seems really weird to me. Like, why would you do that? Like, your emotions, you can't trust your emotions. Your emotions don't have any rationality behind them. They're completely irrational. Like, how could you base important decisions on how you feel about something? It's like when people go on dates and they go, oh, there was no spark there. It's like, that spark is based on irrationality. Like, that spark is not there because there's something really good that you click in, and it's just that's not the case. Like, you can be in a really loving relationship with someone and there's no, you know, spark. Like, the spark is not... I've had a spark with people that have been awful for me. Like, that spark doesn't tell you anything. That spark tells you whether or not, like, you're on the same wavelength for a little bit, but, you know, that could just be false, and there could be lots of explanations for that and why you're feeling like that. You might be susceptible to it because you've been looking for it. I don't know, there could be loads of explanations for it. So I just find it really weird. But I've been reading this book, so this one, Emotional Intelligence, by Daniel Goleman. Goleman. just checking it was still recording because my other one just cut off loads, and I was like, for God's sake, I've got to talk about it again. I can't remember what I spoke about. But anyway, so I've been reading that book, and what it actually says, which I found really interesting, is that it's not possible to make a logical decision without emotionally thinking about something. And I think this matches up to a book that I read, which was Why Good People Are Divided by Politics and Religion, and was saying that the views that you have are based on, you know, they're already there. So, for example, your belief in which political party is the best is probably based on other characteristics, like whether you're open to experience and adventurous, and, you know, whether you're traditional or not, or whatever. All those kind of traits culminate into your belief in a political party. But what you'll do is you'll logicise it and say, well, actually, I really like it because they've got good policies and whatever else, which is not true. So intuitively, you have kind of an opinion about things that you then try and logic afterwards, which means that you always make decisions based on intuition, that you always go with your heart. So then your logic isn't actually in control. Now, if you think about it in terms of what I was talking about before, you, the person that's conscious, is your logic, and your unconscious mind that you can't control, that's got stuff going into it all the time that you don't know anything about, is your heart, is your intuition. And so there's two sides of you, but when I say you, I don't mean you who's experiencing this conversation right now. I'm talking to you globally, your whole brain. So it's weird, isn't it? It's like the conscious side of you is you. It's like, what do I mean by you? So I'm getting really confused. I mean, I'm not getting confused, but I think you're getting confused by my explanation. So you now, who you think you are, is your conscious, your logical side. But I'm also talking to the other side of you, which is your unconscious side, which is your intuition, that you don't have access to, or that you might have access to. Like, some people have greater access to it than others, I think. You know, people who are quite intuitive and understand. For example, I will sit in a restaurant and I'll have a look at the menu and I'll be able to decide instantaneously what I want. And I'll look over the other options for a little while, but I'll know what I want. Like, I've decided straight away as soon as I've looked at the menu, because my intuition decided for me straight away, but my logic side wants to think it through and wants to kind of come to some conclusion, but I'll know straight away. So actually, see, this is the problem. So my logical side, my head, is having this conversation with you about whether it's good or not to have a head or heart reaction to something. So it's going to be biased in the way it's explaining it. So I've gone full circle, and now basically what I'm saying is that my intuition has already made the decision, my heart's already made the decision for me, and then my logic side will logicise it afterwards. But then the book says that it's both. So now I'm confused about what I think about it. They did studies where some people didn't have access to the intuition and some people didn't have access to the logic because of damage to different brain areas in the left and right hemisphere. And what they found was that they couldn't make any decisions, they couldn't go about their everyday life, like they had to have both, that your brain works with both, that you have to have head and heart to make the decision, you have to have both left and right hemisphere, you have to have the emotional side and the logical side. You know, some people think that being a robot and not having any emotion would be better for us, but in actual fact that is what makes us really good at decisions. You know, the decision to kind of let someone die or save someone is based on our emotions to it. You know, logically it wouldn't be safe for us to help, but we would chuck ourselves in a canal to save someone, because you don't go with logic in those situations, you go with emotions. So it's kind of like that balancing, that weighing up all the time of which one you should do. Should you be logical? Should you be emotional? The answer is it's both. The answer is that every decision you make is both. You might be biased towards one or the other because you're not in balance. So, you know, as a person, you spend a lot more of your time doing left brain activities like, you know, sciencey, mathsy, kind of logical computing kind of activities, or you might be more right dominant, you're very arty, creative, spiritual, you meditate, you know, that kind of thing. Although meditation has been found to kind of bridge connections between the two. You know, if you use somebody who seeks out both kinds of activities, like, you know, I do that a lot, I try and balance what I do. I tend to do activities as well that help with cross integration of my hemispheres so that they work more efficiently. If you kind of become in balance with yourself, you end up making kind of decisions which are intuitive but are logical as well, like the two marry together. And you're not kind of as dominant in one as the other. So in terms of like the mind and existing and whatever, you know, what you've got access to is only half of your brain. The other half's there and you don't know what it's doing. And so what you think of as you isn't actually you. You're like a little guest in the house of you. You know, you've only got access to some of the rooms. A lot of the rooms are locked to you. And they won't always be that way, like they will open up. But you've got to kind of rummage a little bit and kind of, you know, figure out how to open some of the doors to be able to use the function of yourself like to the full capacity. And is that even really going to be possible? You know, there's lots of things going on in your mind that you don't know, that you'll never know. But, you know, your mind is, you know, that's another thing actually that I was going to talk about, is that I read this book called The Chimp Paradox, and it's very, you know, if you haven't read it already, you need to read it. It's explaining how the brain and what you're aware of, so who you feel you are, is not the only thing that's going on in your brain. You have lots of other parts as well, and it conceptualizes it in terms of like your emotions are a chimp, the human is kind of, you know, what you're aware of, and there's a computer with everything that's stored on it of what's happened, like your memory, I guess. But like responses that you give that are kind of automatic. And it was kind of talking about all that, and it's interesting that you've got so many different parts of your brain that you're only a little part of it. You're not all of it. You're like a little tiny little section. Everything else that's going on, so it's like, who even are you? Like, you're not who you think you are. Like, you're not in control of your whole brain. You're a little tiny part of it. You're in your prefrontal cortex. That's it. That's all you are. You're not in any other bits at all. So it's like, you know, when you have like thoughts going on in your mind, you know, a lot of people say that they have thoughts like, oh, you're not good enough, and like a bullying voice. I've never had a bullying voice at all. And if I ever, the only reason recently why I've had the odd thing slip in is because people have told me that they have a bullying voice, and because I'm very susceptible to things. So if someone says something to me, it's more likely to happen. So for example, when I was at college, a girl said to me that she found it really difficult to wee when she knew there was somebody outside the toilet cubicle. And since then, it's now been a problem for me, which I have to try and overcome every time. So like I get a bit iffy if there's someone in the toilet and I have to like relax myself because I get tensed up. It's ridiculous, isn't it? But I don't know how to share that with you, that's so oversharing. But yeah, so like I get susceptible to it. So I've had like the odd but the odd kind of thought come through, and then I'm like, go away, like, you're not welcome, like, shut up and go away, like, that's not true, don't try and make me feel shit like that, you're not gonna do that to me. So I kind of just like bat them away like that. I'm like, fuck off, like, no. So, you know, the thoughts that you have in your mind, they're not you, they're just kind of like, they're like noise coming off your brain, like, because it's got nothing better to do. So don't listen to it. I was watching my video back and I thought that what I needed to clarify was the difference between intuition and between emotions, because I'd kind of like discussed them as the same thing, because at first I hadn't really like sectioned it out in my mind of what I thought about it. But I think we have like emotions that I guess people refer to as the heart, but my belief is that they're completely irrational, as I was saying before, based on the fact that they come from childhood and we didn't really have the logical side of us then to kind of rationalise our feelings about things. But the intuitive side of us, that's kind of like the unconscious processing of information that we don't have access to, that knows a lot more stuff than we do. So for example, you know, when you first meet somebody and you just get like a really iffy feeling about them, and you just, the energy is just not quite right there, that's because you're processing that information unconsciously and it's telling you things. You know, for example, you're processing their facial expressions and their body language without even realising that you're doing it, and you're understanding whether or not that person is genuine or whether they're fake, or, you know, kind of how they're responding, and your reaction to them is intuitive. And then you think, well, you know, why don't I like that person? It doesn't make any sense, but you just don't, and that's why. And so that intuitive part of you is actually what your heart is, and it's with that and the head, which is the bit that you're conscious of, that if you can combine the two of them together and make the decision together, then you'll make a good decision. But if you are just listening to your emotions, or you're just listening to your logic, and you're not kind of tapping into that unconsciousness, then that's when you perhaps don't make very great decisions. So I just thought I'd clarify that, because that was a little bit where I was like contradicting myself a little bit, and I think that was why, because my understanding of what emotions were and what intuition were, I was clubbing them together, when in actual fact I don't believe that. I believe that they're separate. So to summarise, you know, this whole perception in our society of people ruling with the head or ruling with the heart is rubbish. You know, you rule with both, and actually it's not you who's ruling either, and like, you are part of it. It's kind of like the whole of you that you don't have access to is actually making your decisions, is actually kind of coming up with a solution to your problems, is analysing all the information that you've got. It's like you're doing things that you're not even aware of, and you probably never will be, because you are not the centre of your universe. You are a little satellite within it, and nothing is going to change about that. So you're a small little grain in a big overall system, and so you're not as important as you think you are.